Have you ever wondered what is the best food sensitivity test that there is out there? Or why are there so many tests and how can you tell which one is the best for you? Well, back in 2021, I wrote my first podcast episode on food sensitivity tests. It was episode 59, How to Choose the Best Food Sensitivity Test for You. And at the time, I had no exposure or knowledge about the food sensitivity test that I'm going to be sharing with you today. So I pretty much didn't mention it at all in that episode. But if I were to redo that episode, I would hands down have highlighted the special and unique food sensitivity test that we're going to talk about today. And I would have never ordered another MRT test, which is pretty much what has happened since I learned about this test. So today's test you're going to learn about is likely a food sensitivity test you've never heard of. And I only say that because most of my clients have never heard of it before either. But this test is far superior to any other food sensitivity test I've come across before. So to explain exactly how and why this test is so much better than Viome, MRT, Tiny Health, or any other food sensitivity test that at least I've looked at, I'm having on Adair Anderson, who's a registered dietitian nutritionist and representative of Vibrant Wellness. Adair holds a bachelor's degree in biochemistry, a master's degree in clinical nutrition, and today she's going to tell you all about my personal favorite food sensitivity test, the Food Zoomers by Vibrant Wellness. Vibrant Wellness offers a myriad of lab tests aside from food sensitivity testing, from Lyme testing to comprehensive gut health testing, but the lab that I personally order the most from them is their food sensitivity test, the Food Zoomers. As you'll learn about on today's episode, the Food Zoomer tests your body for food sensitivities in a way that is completely different than almost every other lab out there. Whether you're a food sensitivity test veteran with dozens under your belt and maybe an equal amount of confusion caused by those tests, or maybe you've never done your first food sensitivity test yet, this episode is guaranteed to enlighten you and give you insight into the capacities and limitations of food sensitivity tests and to explain why doing a food zoomer is likely your best bet to getting super clear on what foods you should and shouldn't eat to heal your gut. And before we get started, disclaimer, by having this episode out, I am not suggesting that you only need to eat the right food to heal. Food is at most only 20% of the equation to fully heal your gut. If you aren't familiar with that idea, that food alone isn't enough to heal you, and you're not sure what the rest of the 80% of the equation is, go to betterbellytherapies.com/training or click the link in the show notes to get my free full training on the 5 toxin trap. Now, let's get diving into this food sensitivity test podcast episode. Hey friend, welcome to the Better Belly podcast. If you're currently trying endless supplements, doctor visits, and diet changes to heal your mystery symptoms, you are in the right place. We're here to solve the real root causes behind your gut, hormone, skin, sleep, and brain concerns, literally anything and everything in your body. My name is Allison Jordan. I'm a functional medicine practitioner that has supported over 150 clients just like you to heal problems that no one has been able to fix. You don't need a perfect diet or a random supplement you found on Instagram to heal. You need a proven system that heals your whole body from the inside out. That's what I'm here to share with you, episode by episode. It's time to make health easy again. And just as a reminder, this information is not meant to diagnose, manage, or treat disease. Always consult with your own health practitioner before you make any changes to your health. I am so excited today to have onto the podcast Adair Anderson, who is repping for today with Vibrant Wellness, one of my favorite lab producers that we get to partner with. And one of the favorite labs, there's so many labs that Vibrant has that are really great, but one of my favorite labs that I've used the most is their food sensitivity test called the Zoomers. There are Food Zoomers, and Adair is going to talk to us today about these Zoomers as an expert and a representative from Vibrant. Now, some of our listeners on the podcast, you might have already heard me talk about labs in the past, and there's definitely one episode in particular where I talk about not a Vibrant lab. the food zoomers, and that's just because I didn't know they existed. And as soon as I learned about food zoomers and used them a couple times, it was like hands down, like this is mind blowing, and getting us such clear results and clear information for our clients. And so, um, we're going to tackle today that conversation right now. It's a big conversation on what's the best food sensitivity test out there today. And we're not going to compare every single or name drop every single food sensitivity test out there, but I will say that what we're going to talk about is going to apply to a lot of other tests like Viome, Tiny Health, the MRT. The comparisons we're making, they are the opposite of what food zoomers are in many respects. And so, even those tests are all slightly different how they function, food zoomers are totally different. So, Adair, I would love for you to start us off. Can you just answer this question of what is the difference between a food zoomer test and just food sensitivity testing in general?
Yeah, great question, Allison. So, food sensitivity tests measure the whole undigested three-dimensional proteins. So, think of like a ball of yarn. And the pieces of protein that are on the outside are generally water loving, so hydrophilic. And so, when you're getting immune reactivity to a whole undigested protein, you're getting mainly reactivity to the outside of that protein, to the water loving part of that protein. Now, when you digest those proteins, you unwind that ball of yarn, you're cutting into small, tiny pieces called polypeptides. And it's the peptides that we're measuring with the food zoomer testing. We're really zooming into all the pieces of that whole protein. And these are going to be more water hating, so hydrophobic, so lipophilic. Um, and the antibodies that are attaching are going to be totally different. Like it's a totally different shape, it's a totally different structure. And so we're really looking at the small two-dimensional peptides in the zoomers that are already digested by your digestive tract.
Yeah, and I will say immediately one thing that is really interesting if someone's trying to imagine like why is this relevant? Why should I care? There's this really interesting phenomena when you do vibrant testing, and I this is the favorite my favorite way to do it. We'll do a Zoomer bundle because you get a lot of Zoomer testing for just an incredible price. Five right now it's five. You used to do four, now you added in a fifth. I mean, like, come on, so juicy. But five food Zoomers. I'm typically doing things like I just really like the wheat, the corn, the grains, the lectins, and the dairy. And then you'll throw on top of that a free whole food sensitivity testing, which is what you just described, that three-dimensional water loving testing. And that's what most people are doing. That's what I actually don't know of any testing that isn't that. And that could just be that I'm ignorant, but that's just because so many are only doing that version. Well, what's interesting is when you get the test for a client. I get a client's results, and they have some of it is a lot of it is these protein peptide food zoomer results. And then I also have that three-dimensional protein or quote unquote whole food testing result. One of them might say they're sensitive to wheat and one of them won't. And the client's like, well, which one is it? And it's like, well, actually, we finally have a better answer because if it's on one of them, they're sensitive to it. And what's not happening, what's with when you're doing just one of the types, which is for most people this whole food sensitivity testing, you could be missing food sensitivities that people have for a variety of reasons. Of this like water loving type. And what I find is that when I tested with clients, they're like, oh, corn's never showed up as a food sensitivity on my test. That was my case. I was super sensitive to corn and rice. I didn't know it. I miscarried. I ended up doing a Zoomer with the corn and rice Zoomer protein peptide testing on it. And I was like, super red flag, very high. It was keeping my inflammation high. And I was so grateful. And it made a big difference in my health. So I say that as the practitioner using the information Adair just used. Like she just gave you this coolest, most sciencey version of like what's the difference in the testing. But from now on out, if you hear me talk about whole food sensitivity testing, we're referring to that three-dimensional protein. And it still is valuable, right? We're not saying it's not valuable. But really that protein peptide, it's like peeling back the next layer.
Totally is.
So I would love to, and I kind of already answered this, but I would love to hear from you. Like, if you had anything else to say, I got very excited there. Like, would you add anything else on? And like, why would someone do a food zoomer on top of a food sensitivity test, or maybe even instead of one?
Yeah, so I really love combining both of them because it gives you more insight. When you're looking at food sensitivity testing, when people have the reactivity to the whole proteins, it's usually a result of poor digestion and leaky gut. So think about it. When you are not digesting your food and you are getting those whole proteins down into the small intestine and you have leaky gut, those whole proteins are getting into the gut lumen, into the wall, in exposure to the gut associated lymphoid tissue or the GALT. As you know, 70 to 80% of our whole immune system is in our gut to help us figure out what's friend, what's foe, what are we being exposed to. And when you're getting exposed to those whole proteins, then all of a sudden your immune system's like, what is this foreign weird thing? And you start reacting to it. So when people have a lot of food sensitivities to foods they eat all the time, I'm like, okay, you probably have maldigestion and leaky gut. And it's like one more piece of evidence that helps me identify what we need to address from a root cause perspective. Um, it's a lot more difficult to unlearn the reactivity to the peptides because they're already digested. They're already tiny. It's easier for them to traverse into the gut through the gut barrier, interact with the immune cells. So I found in clinical practice that once someone has a food zoomer reactivity level reaction, it's harder to get rid of that than a food sensitivity test because you can heal the gut, you can start improving digestion, and then all of a sudden you're not reacting to whole wheat proteins, but you might still be reacting to the wheat peptides like gliadins and glutadins and serpins and farrinins.
Yes. Adair, this is and I've said it in a much more simple way, which there's pros and cons to simplicity, but what I tell my clients is that you have permanent and you have temporary food sensitivities. But you said it in a more accurate way, which is even more beautiful. But the temporary ones, these are the ones that you're developing because you have leaky gut and that you're then absorbing the food. Let's say you just love eating bananas and you're eating bananas all the time, but you have leaky gut. So these whole protein, these three-dimensional proteins that are not being digested are getting absorbed by these ginormous holes in your gut that you would never absorb that even if you weren't digesting right, if you didn't have leaky gut, you just they're too big. They just wouldn't make it into the bloodstream, but they do make it into the bloodstream when you have leaky gut. And then the body's like, basically like, what's this piece of banana doing here? And that's why you could do an MRT. Sorry guys, we're gonna like, Adair's not doing this, okay? This is an Allison thing. She's being very polite, but you're gonna do these whole food sensitivity tests, Tiny Health, Viome, MRTs, and every time you do it, they're gonna look different, and it makes your brain wanna die. Like, clients are confused, practitioners feel like they have to create whole new eating schedules, and you're just chasing the next thing without actually healing anything. And so if anybody resonates with that, that's why that's happening. I hope that brings relief to some people of like, there is a better way. We're going to talk about that. And some of the better way has to do with at least getting a better idea. You can at least say, well, what are potentially some of my more permanent ones? But you said it in a better way, harder to unlearn.
Yeah.
Like, I think that's a more beautiful, fine-tuned way to say it. And that's clinically what I've experienced, that both in my own health, and I'm a really good candidate because I can track my health so well to know exactly what I'm doing. But I've personally found that I've yet to unlearn wheat, rice, and corn. I'm having some success with dairy, which is really interesting, but it's not total, and I don't even fully know what that's about. But I'm using myself as my first test subject, but in general, I will tell clients it's easier to just block it into temporary and permanent. And those temporary ones, they go away fast once you are starting to heal that leaky gut. So, another thing that's really interesting, and you're going to be able to dive deep into this, is how accurate are food zoomer results. And most people might not care about this, but something that you told me, and I thought, wow, like this is so cool. Maybe a better way to say it is like, why are food zoomers so different? And why is Vibrant doing this when no one else is? Like, how did they get access to this technology, or what's going on inside the technology that makes them able to look into these protein peptides?
So Vibrant was founded by scientists in the areas of now I'm not going to remember, not being able to remember what they're anyway. So they're scientists in the study of computer science and I can't remember
Pop
the other
quiz.
one. Yeah, pop quiz. I'll come back. It'll come back to me later. Um,
Yes.
so yeah, food Zoomers are quite accurate because Vibrant was founded by scientists. They actually developed this new technology, tried to sell it to a very well-known hospital system who said, no, it'll put everyone out of employment if we transfer over to this.
What? I didn't know that part.
So they're like, well, we'll just make our own company. So they launched the Wheat
Ooh.
Zoomer first. We actually have 3 studies in conjunction with a Mayo Clinic gastroenterologist, Dr. Joseph Murray. The first one was just an abstract that we introduced at the, let's see, American Gastroenterological Association in 2013. So this is often part of Digestive Disease Week, where clinicians, professionals get together. It's like a sneak peek of what's coming down the pipeline. And then in 2016, we actually published an article in PLOS One about the methodology. So if you're interested, I can send you that article.
Yeah,
Which
send
is
it. We'll try and put it in the show notes.
perfect.
So for our sciencey listeners.
So I'm going to try to make it as simple as possible. I have a tendency to really dive into the details. But big picture, we take this silicone wafers, we functionalize the surface, like make it sticky, and then we put the peptides. We like make the peptides on the surface. So there's like one peptide for every like little square space, and then we laser stealth dice them. You can't use scissors; it'll fracture like broken glass. Not the safety glass, but the shards of glass. So laser dice into these tiny little microchips. And then we have a machine that sort of is like the kind of machine you use when you're doing cameras. And then it picks them up and it puts them on a pillar plate. So imagine like tiny skyscrapers on a plate, like a four by four or like 4x8 grid. So like 32 little plates, pillars, but each pillar has 100 of these microchips. It's like ELISA technology, but instead of one antigen per well, there's 100 antigens per pillar. And then we flip it upside down and stick it into the patient sample. So tiny patient sample, like just the size of like a normal well, but the pillar into the well of the blood, and then you're interacting with 100 antigens. Well, it's usually 96 because it's 100 minus the 4 controls in the corners. And then we use a chemiluminescence, which is very, very high signal to noise ratio. So it's very precise, very accurate. It's all automated with a computer. And then it tells how much of intensity is the chemiluminescent signal to know how much binding, how much antigen binding, antibody binding there is for each microchip. And because it's on the microchip, we can tell exactly how strongly you're reacting to each different peptide within that food.
Which is really cool because there's a lot of different ways to do whole food sensitivity testing. And we're not even talking about whole food. We're actually talking about protein peptides. But if you compare it to some of the options for whole food sensitivity testing, like the MRT, they do it by blood volume. So you have to have a lot more blood, and then the way you measure it isn't as precise, which is one of the just interesting components. But I didn't think about this the first time when you were telling me about the chemiluminescence. Do you know if chemiluminescence that you guys are measuring here with the light, if that's related at all to what the light is being measured by stars, what astronomers do? I don't know if because they'll measure light of stars of like, is the star wavering, for example? Is it getting kind of closer and further away? Or how hot is the star? Or what is the star made of? What chemicals are inside of it? By what color it's burning? Things like that. It sounds like it's probably a little different, but do you know if it's similar or... Okay, it's okay. This
I
is a
wish
very
I
different
knew.
realm of science.
I wish I knew. It reminds me of like phosphorescent, like plankton who are glowing at night. It reminds me
Uh-huh.
of that. It's like a very measurable, very predictable, consistent glow that happens because it's like, antigen and then antibody and then link the thing and then link the thing and then the chemiluminescence. So it's
Right.
like a
And then does it
stacking.
does it glow or not? How
Does
much
it
is it
glow or not?
glowing?
How much is it glowing, right? How strong is that reactivity? And I remember that also in the semiconductor industry. scientists in the semiconductor.
Semiconductors. I
Yes.
know things that people are like, what are these things? And honestly, some of you guys, if this just some of the words go over your head, totally fine. Some people, you'll want to go and Google it. You'll want to go and know, why is this different? Why is it better? Like, so one of the things you had told me, Adair, in a previous conversation is these founders were students at Arizona University. They were full time devoting themselves to developing new research and new ideas. They weren't trying to duplicate what everybody else was doing. They were trying to be really do something new, and they were so successful that they got shot down by conventional medicine. And so that might be one reason people, I know that for me, when I first learned about Vibrant and these food peptides and how they're more of a permanent side of things opposed to temporary, which is just a very grounding experience, and again gets you out of that loop of constantly changing food sensitivities. One of the things that'll happen that I wondered is, if this is so true, why isn't everyone doing it? And that's been a question I haven't been able to answer, and I feel like you just answered that a little bit for me, of like, A, it's kind of new technology, and then B, the people, the one avenue you could have gotten it to the most number of people, which is a hospital system, didn't want it. Like, and so there, I mean, that's why Vibrant's this kind of hidden gem of hidden and not so hidden, but sometimes to me, I think that they're this is me saying this, not a dare, disclaimer, not Vibrant. But one thing that frustrates me as a practitioner is when I see a lot of marketing for what we call direct to consumer labs, Tiny Health and Viome, where I will literally see Instagram ads like, buy our lab, it's going to change your kid's life, it's going to change your life. I'm like, you're just another whole food sensitivity lab, but their marketing is so shiny that it seems like it should change your life. Vibrant, you guys are working, like, you have good marketing, but you're not trying to be, you don't have the sleazy marketing. You're like really scientifically based. And you guys as a company are so much more focused on having an amazing product and just letting it organically grow. And that's one of the reasons I wanted to have you guys on the podcast, to represent, like, hey, if you guys haven't heard of Vibrant, or if you don't know why the Zoomers are so much better, or at least different than whole food testing, then here's our chance to know. So no one's paying me to say this, guys. I genuinely have been impressed with Vibrant, and again, which is why I wanted Adair on to come and talk sciencey stuff to us. And again, that's probably why other people aren't doing it. It's just too sciencey. So, I feel like I've already answered this a little bit, but it was one of our questions. I'm clearly very excited about this topic. But is there anything else you would add on how these protein peptide testing would compare to a test like the MRT?
Yeah, so we're looking at antibody levels to the antigen, to the peptides. Whereas, well, I can't really speak to another company's
Okay,
methodology, but it's not
sure.
that. Like it's not that. It's looking at a different method, and from the little that I know, like it's not as accurate
Okay.
because you're looking at, I believe, like cells, and
Right.
cells can behave differently depending on what's going on. It might not be an immune reaction. It might be just a malnutrition reaction, or, who knows?
That's really interesting. I know that for the MRT, again, not being a total expert on it, but what I remember when I was studying it and using it a lot is that it's a white blood cell reaction that creates the blood volume change, which is what they're measuring to measure how sensitive you are to something. So that is a cellular reaction, and it's an immune system reaction, but it's not antibodies.
Mhm.
Um, is there, and you've actually already talked about this a little bit, but tell us more if there's anything you haven't said yet. Is there any research supporting the technology or methodology of the Vibrant or of the Food Zoomer panels, or maybe other tests that Vibrant is doing as well? We can throw those in there.
So I'm actually really excited to share some emerging new evidence in support of these Zoomer testing. Is that we actually had a clinical trial where people did our food sensitivity test plus all the Zoomers, And over the course of the study, 84% of the participants had an improvement in their symptoms after eliminating the reactive foods. So still in preprint, so not yet peer reviewed, but super exciting. To my knowledge, this is the first of its kind to actually be published. And the fact that it was so beneficial and so showed such positive results is just, I mean, just evidence that this is technology and a test that a lot of people could benefit from.
Yeah. Real quick here, can you hear a horrible buzzing sound in the background for me? If
I
not,
I don't, but
okay.
it did get a little lower.
Oh, I got a little quieter. I bet, okay, it's probably canceling out the sound because I live in an apartment complex. It's a really high quality one. This has never happened to me on a podcast, but apparently they decided to hire the leaf blowers today, and they are right outside my apartment. So, and I know Zoom cancels out noise, which is, and I didn't know if this software does, but that's probably why I'm quieter, is it's trying to cancel out the noise while keeping my volume.
I'm hopeful that the fire alarm doesn't go off during this because they're testing it sometime today.
You and me both, man. Well, you're like, seriously, guys, right now? Come on. Okay, we'll be able to cut all that out. Okay, so 84%, Adair, that is
Mhm.
amazing. I mean, it sounds amazing to me. I personally can say I have not like spent tons of time looking at the results for food sensitivity test. Like, if you just take a random population of symptomatic people and then give a food sensitivity test to them and then have them follow it, how successful is it? But 84% in general for any one type of therapeutic intervention is really high. Like any kind of therapeutic intervention, whether even like pharmaceuticals, like 84% would be really good. Um, and I'm curious, you said it's the first of its kind. In which
Mhm.
way is it is it just that it's the first to look at protein peptides or to compare, or I'm curious.
Yeah, the first study done on the efficacy of food sensitivity and food Zoomer testing.
Okay. Yeah.
Yeah, there. I did touch base with our entire clinical team to get their thoughts in this area, and I'd love to share just a summary of what we came
Oh,
up with, which is
yes.
there is lack of significant scientific agreement on this topic. There is scientific uncertainty in the evidence base still, but we're starting it, right? The evidence is growing. It just any time we're talking about science, it takes like 20 years for, like the bench to the bedside. Um,
Yeah.
However, unproven does not equal disproven
Yeah. Got
because
it.
in clinical practice, I see it work all the time and there's validity in that data point.
Yeah. Right. And that's what I'm seeing in my clients as well
Mm-hmm.
is, I had I'm trying to remember who it was who said this to me. I feel like it was a professor, but intuition is fast, science is slow. And
Totally.
like this is built on science, but the additional component of science is always the scientific method. It's testing. It's not
Mm-hmm.
just, well, this seems like it works or subjective experience. The subjective experience is always what makes us say, this seems like it would be worth doing, like a bigger review. If you're
Mm-hmm.
already like, no, this looks like it's not working, no one's going to take the time and effort and money to go and put a big clinical trial together. But got it. Basically, they're this voice. The scientists and researchers in Vibrant are a voice really advocating for the trustworthiness of protein peptide testing and this probably the specific way that they're doing it. And there's some contention in the scientific community on if it's trustworthy, and they're like, fine, we'll do a little trial.
Mm-hmm.
I
Yep.
love it.
There's a food sensitivity clinical trial video coming out soon, not released yet, but as soon as we get it, I will share it with you, the URL
Yeah,
link.
that would be beautiful. And we can, even if this episode comes out before that's available, we'll go back and put it in. So it might be in by the time somebody's listening to this, which is very exciting. Um, all right. Big question here. I actually get asked this a lot by my clients. I'm really curious what you're going to say because you already alluded to saying that protein peptide sensitivity, which is the food zoomer testing, is hard to unlearn or difficult.
Mhm.
Um, but just I mean, literally just this week, someone's like, can I unlearn the food reactivity I got on this Zoomer test? And I would love, could you tell us any more on like, or just elaborate any more on that phrase, difficult to unlearn? Is there any evidence you guys have seen at Vibrant, or any stories you've heard, or even just any scientific reasons why this might be possible? Or is it kind of just yet unseen? But can you unlearn a food reactivity from the food Zoomer?
Yeah, so I think it is possible sometimes, but it also depends on the dose. Because I've had clients who could maybe get a little cross contamination of something every once in a while and don't have any increase in symptoms. And then with a higher amount of that food, like eating too much of it at one time or too much over the course of a week or a month, all of a sudden the symptoms come back. The other thing to think about is that sometimes it's symptoms you can't really feel, like things happening in your brain where you're not going to notice a slight decline in your mental function. Because it's not just
Yeah,
impacting the gut, it's impacting the skin, it's impacting your cognitive, it's impacting, maybe your thyroid if you have predisposition towards like a Hashimoto's thyroiditis. So
right.
um, it really comes down to quality of life and that type of balance. Like what we don't want you to just be deprived your whole life of everything all the time and be totally scared to eat out. But on the other hand, like be careful, be smart, plan ahead, call the restaurant, say, hey, I'm really reactive to this thing. Can you assure me that I can be safe eating at your establishment? So it's like this trade-off.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's what I've practically seen is that, like, for example, the Dairy Zoomer I had results on, and yet now I've like if it's milk, it's a no, ice cream, it's a no, even in small doses. But I've been able to have small amounts of like dairy cheese, for example. If I just want to like be like, oh, what does my husband's gluten-free pizza taste like? Grain-free pizza. If there's like actual dairy on it, which he has no problems with, I take a bite and I'm fine. So there's like a dosage component, which I don't fully understand the mechanism to that. I understand the mechanism better for why dosage matters for whole food sensitivity or whole food sensitivities. Do you know why dosage might matter? I'm trying to imagine the how that would happen with the protein peptides. It seems that the body would still be pickier, but
Yeah, I think it comes down to like if you scratch your skin once, like nothing really happens. But if you scratch and scratch and scratch and scratch and scratch, eventually like your skin will get red and inflamed because it's how much your immune system is being poked at.
yeah, sure. Yeah, are you and you'll probably get a small reaction to a small exposure.
Hmm.
But that would be very limited to itself and might not cause like a really notable symptom for you, whether that's brain fog or some type of
Hmm.
GI symptom, or fatigue or skin issue. And I try to educate our clients like when we're talking about food sensitivity exposure, do not just think about your gut. And that's one huge misnomer of they'll be like, well, I don't get any gut symptoms when I eat wheat. We're not, the number one symptom for wheat sensitivity is not GI, it's neurological. Like
Hmm.
grouping, a grouping of symptoms. It's neurological. So that I'm really glad that you brought that up about thinking about other symptoms in the body and then also dosage for the protein peptide. That confirms what I've been seeing. Again, particularly using myself as my first testing candidate, but that's really great to hear. So let's say someone's listening to this and like, this is so exciting. I'm sick of my old food sensitivity tests that I've gotten. I'm really curious what a Zoomer would say, a test might say. If they're in our program, the Better Belly Blueprint, we're automatically recommending or getting them access to that food Zoomer bundle. But if someone wanted to connect with Vibrant further, whether it's on this test or other tests that you guys do, how could they connect with you guys, learn more about the company, or potentially order some labs or even know what labs to order with you guys?
Oh, so easy. Just vibrant-wellness.com. There's a button up in the right hand corner for either patient or provider. You click it and you get in the system.
It's amazing.
It's all
And
right
you
there.
you you actually have a PDF too that you shared on like how to
Hmm.
choose your vibrant food Zoomers. So
Hmm.
we're gonna have that is just like a free gift to our listeners. It'll be in the show notes. You also gave us a code for people to get a discount on their first order. Can you tell people about that?
Oh, yeah. So if you have never ordered with Vibrant before, you can create an account and use the code BVibrant, that's the lowercase b, capital V for Vibrant, to get $400 off your first order.
Yeah. And we have that in the show notes. So if anybody's like, I don't think I can remember that or anything, it'll be in the show notes. We also have a free call with Vibrant, like just a link that you guys can book for the Vibrant Wellness. They have their own podcast. I actually have been on it recently. I don't know if the episode will be out by the time you guys go and check it out, but a really great time with your guys' podcast hosts, Emmy, who's a naturopathic doctor, and Melissa. And then you guys have your website, which I think has been put together really well in terms of looking at all the different types of tests you have and seeing sample test results and all sorts of stuff. And last, you have an Instagram if like people like hanging out there. So any other ways to connect or that people should know about before we end this?
I think that's it.
Yeah. Awesome. Well, Adair, thank you so much for coming on. Thank you for representing and bringing that information really from like taking the time to go and talk with that research team and bringing us this clinical information that it's just so powerful. It's so real. It's not hype. I mean, it's exciting, so there's hype there, but it's not the hype that I personally see as a practitioner with some labs where it makes me sad when I see, like, I'm not sad if Vibrant, like, if people learn about it and begin to trust them. And so thank you guys. Thank you for on behalf of us to Vibrant for doing the work you guys are doing. And thanks for coming on the Better Belly podcast today.
My pleasure. Thanks for having me.